I'm a bit of a campaigner and an activist at heart. So I really want to be able to interview more campaigners and initiatives and charities that are trying to increase awareness around health and well-being, both in the environment and in our homes and lifestyles, but from a grassroots level up. I feel like it's really important to acknowledge all the smaller initiatives out there that are doing such great work to change awareness around health and well-being on a more local and community level. I think sometimes it can feel a bit overwhelming and exhausting that whenever we look at our medical services or our water services or any of our other services that are meant to be keeping us well, they quite often are just failing and are so polluted, and yet there's nothing we can do about it. But there are so many great campaigns and initiatives going on out there at the moment that I think it's really important to feel like we can all do something together and make a difference. So with that in mind, in this week's episode, I speak to Jemima Hartshorn from Mums for Lungs, who is a campaigner for better air quality in London and beyond. Welcome back to another episode of the Healthy Home Show. And today I'm speaking to a lady from an initiative called Mums for Lungs. I'm not sure whether you call it a charity or initiative, but Jemima Hartshorn is passionate about air quality, and with Mums for Lungs is making real differences to the air quality in our streets and to the air quality of our children. So I really wanted to speak to Jemima, and it's taken us a little while to kind of like get it together, but I'm really, really pleased to have you here, Jemima. Thank you so much for joining us. And I wondered if you just tell us, like right off the bat, a little bit about Mums for Lungs and what you're trying to achieve.
Oh, thank you so much, Charlie, for having me and for all the patience so far. So, I'm hoping this will be extra fun and interesting for all the listeners. So Mums for Lungs is a campaign group I founded about 8 years ago when I was on maternity leave for the first time, and I had this little baby in a pram, and there was all these cars. And, I sort of started reading a bit more in the newspapers, and I started reading about air pollution. And at that time, I was living in Brixton, and the Brixton Monitor would breach annual legal limits by the 6th of January every year. And we knew then, and we know even more clearly now, that air pollution is incredibly, incredibly harmful to everyone, but especially to vulnerable people. So people with underlying health conditions, and very much so babies and children. And children growing up in areas with high levels of air pollution, so levels of air pollution all of London had at those times, grow up with smaller lungs, and they grow up not being able to concentrate as well at school, and they grow up at risk of heart disease, lung disease, COPD. They grow up with much more asthma. So I thought, with a few other mums at the time on mat leave, we thought, this is not right. This is not acceptable. Our children cannot be at risk just by breathing. London's children are at risk by being on a playground. They're at risk when they're in school. They're at risk of stunting their lungs when they are breathing inside their homes. And that is not right. So we wanted to do something about it, and we started campaigning. And
Great.
yeah, we were only campaigning on road transport at the time, like because cars and other forms of road transport, especially diesel vehicles, are a major, major source of air pollution across London. Was then the case, still is the case. And we have now expanded into campaigning on wood burning as well, because we have since then properly understood that there are these two different pollutants that really harm children's health. And the second one, particulate matter, comes from wood burning.
Yeah, and as we're in the depths of winter at the moment, and there's something quite amazingly ancestral sometimes about being able to sit in front of a cozy fire, right? So it's really difficult when I speak to people personally about, the dangers of particulate matter in fires in our households, and trying to convince people that maybe it's not such a great idea to to heat your home with a wood burner, as beautiful as it looks. Um, is it particularly wood burners that you think is the issue, or are there other issues around particulate matter basically in our environment that you think are causing problems to our air quality?
So when it comes to particulate matter, which is basically little pieces of stuff that is much, much smaller in a diameter than a hair, much, much smaller than a dust particle speckle you might see somewhere, so small that it goes through our lungs. It goes through our lungs, which are meant to be our body's filtration system. But these things are so small, they go through that filter, they go into our bloodstream, and they then cause inflammation anywhere across our body because that's not where they're meant to be. One of the biggest sources is wood burning. And wood burning, domestic wood burning, is the bigger source of these tiny particles than road transport. Road transport is also a real problem for gas, NO2, nitrogen dioxide. That is a huge pollutant. But on the particle side, wood burning is a bigger problem than road transport.
Mm.
But the other thing is, one is the air pollution and the particles that are all around us all the time, everywhere in our shared commodity of air. But there is obviously much worse situation if you live next to someone who's burning wood. And you've been saying, how cozy it is, how comforting it is to be near fire. I think there is a huge sense of aspiration around a wood burner, right? It means you own your home. It means you can afford it. You can make your home nicer. You give it a focal point. Um, More and more people are installing wood burners on top of the people who already have open fires and old wood burners in our country. And if you live next to someone who's burning wood, huge amounts of air pollution come out of their chimney, out of the flue, and come into your garden, into your house, and there is nothing you can do about it. You're unprotected. And you have no stronghold against your neighbor. And I think that is just really dramatic and really unfair, that you would be exposed to something which, in most cases, is something people do for coziness, for comfort, not actually because it is their main or only source of heating.
Mm.
And yeah, that is why we sort of campaign on wood burning. And I think the other point is, though, that wood burning, many people associate it with caveman, and we hear a lot of mankind has always sat by a fire. You must be kidding me. And I said, well, mankind used to have a life expectancy of 40. So, I find this argument about what mankind always used to do not that helpful. We know now that particulate pollution goes into your brain. It's been found in placentas. It makes you very, very ill. We know that women's risk of getting any kind of cancer massively increases if they are regularly exposed to wood burning, right? Like, we know this stuff now, and we need to end it where we can. And
Mm.
that is sort of the real problem around it. The other problem I really feel is that many, many people buy a wood burner and are not aware of what they're putting inside their home. 200,000 wood burners are sold across the country every year.
Wow.
That could be a million wood burners on Keir Starmer's watch. And I would argue that most people do not think that they are putting something inside their home that will massively increase their risk of cancer, their children's risk of asthma, and their own risk of cardiac issues, just for starters. So,
And as a
there is a
wood
real problem here.
burner, is it a similar so would it be better to have a wood burner in the countryside, or does it pollute the air just as much and is just as damaging for your health whether you're using it in the countryside or in an urban setting? Obviously, in the countryside, you've got more air around you, presumably for the particulate matter to be absorbed into. But I'm wondering whether it's a particular problem in the city, for example, because you've got road pollution added to potential wood burners. So it's kind of like, the levels of particulate matter are kind of increased. But would you say it's a problem whether you're living in the country or whether you're living in an urban environment?
It's a problem wherever you live. And most people, even if they live in the countryside, even if they live in a small hamlet, it's not actually that you live somewhere and for 300 meters around you, there's no house, right? No neighbor that could be affected. Usually, we have, even in a very small village, actually houses quite clustered. So if one or a few are wood burning, then you, as their neighbor, are breathing toxic air, whether you
Mm.
like it or not. The homeowner, the stove owner, the fire owner is also breathing toxic air, which is really problematic and is especially problematic if they are not aware of what they're doing. But the real problem I think also comes to the neighbors, and it doesn't matter where you are. If you're the neighbor of someone who's burning wood, you've got a health hazard in your garden, in your home. The air has become a health hazard.
Okay, so basically, it doesn't matter, even if you've got a wood burner that has got sufficient screen in front of it, that the particulate matter isn't coming back into your own home. Obviously, they're not thinking so much about their neighbor and the kind of pollution that they're kind of like spreading to the environment around their home. So I'm assuming you would then recommend instead just normal central heating.
Yes, I would. Like, if you can avoid burning with wood, then you should. And people then come back to me and say, I can't afford central heating. We have a cost of living crisis.
Mm,
And I don't want anyone sitting in a cold home either. I don't want these things for anyone. Then I say, join us. We can campaign together. We can campaign with other organizations like this. It's not fair. This is the sixth richest economy in the world. And people need to decide whether they want to burn wood or stay cold. That is not an equation that I find acceptable, right? Like, I think we're sometimes being fed a narrative that is frankly ridiculous. No one should have to choose between being warm or polluted or polluting their neighbours. But also, just one more point is that obviously every time you open your wood burner, so even if it has a screen, every time you open it, you get this flood of pollution into your room
mm.
that will stay there for quite a long time, unless you want to immediately open the window or the doors or something like that. But so, it's not just your neighbours, it's also yourself. But also, I think there is sort of a rule of thumb is that even before you can smell wood burning, the particle levels are incredibly high and harmful to your own health. And most of us go out in a winter's night, whether we live in London as I do, or whether you live in the countryside. And on a walk within probably 20 minutes, we're always going to smell wood burning for quite a part of that time. And that's something we need to keep in mind. If you can smell wood burning, it's already harming you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, going back to the work that you do around pollution, actually in urban environments, more around traffic, for example, um, how do you go about trying to raise awareness around pollution in the cities? And have you found that people are quite receptive to this issue? I mean, I know at the moment or in recent years, basically, there's been a lot more media and a lot more awareness around particularly cases where children have become ill and even died from direct effects of air pollution from traffic. But have you found that there's increasing awareness around this issue, or have you found quite a lot of resistance?
So the situation is actually really exciting because the vast majority of people understand that cars and emissions from cars are really unhealthy, right?
Mm,
House prices on a busy road are much lower than on a side road, right? That's because people don't want to live there. They don't want to live in the noise. They don't want to live in the pollution. They don't want to live there. Um, Lots of people get in touch and ask us for support on what they can do around their children's school. People want to hear ideas on green screens, which would protect children. People want to hear how they can campaign for a school street, which is when the road outside a school is blocked up for through traffic twice a day at drop off and pickup times. So awareness is massively increasing. And I think a lot of people really understood what air pollution meant during the pandemic, because in those first few months of the pandemic, at least, air pollution from road transport massively dipped. And we had people getting in touch on a daily basis saying, I am not using my inhaler for the first time.
Mm.
I'm jogging on London streets, which I never used to do. Like, I'm feeling much better. I don't need the respite in the countryside as much anymore. This is, but it's gone back up, and we've gone back to a status quo of road transport at high levels and air pollution at high levels being normal and accepted. So it is a bit of an odd one. And I think policymakers and campaigners were always struggling to find the right way of making sure that people who actually all understand that driving is bad for air pollution also really take the action, which is not drive. Like, there is an understanding, but the data on how much people drive doesn't quite match that understanding. There's a certain kind of cognitive dissonance, but obviously that is much better than the situation we found ourselves when we started campaigning, which was having to make the case that air pollution was coming out of the back of cars, and that was harmful to health.
Yeah, obviously you've had the kind of efforts and support of the London Mayor, for example, who's brought in all the changes around regulations in the ULEZ initiative. I mean, I don't know what you think about that. I find it quite interesting because obviously they're driving people back onto public transport, which makes total sense. But then also when you look at the levels of air pollution within the London Underground, for example, and also you take into consideration the amount of strikes that we've had on the trains over the last couple of years, you can understand why people don't really want to give up their driving. So what do you think about, the kind of air quality levels on public transport, for example? I haven't looked deep down into the figures myself, but I know I've looked at reports before around London Underground and just seen the high levels of not only particulate matter, but, things like cyanide basically that are down there. And it makes you wonder which is the better way to travel, basically.
Yes, it's complex. There's all of these things are complex for starters. And I think in many of these things, we've also been screwed a bit as a public transport. I think the public transport system outside London is definitely not good enough. There's no doubt about it. There's cuts to buses, and they don't run very frequently, and they don't run at the right times, and things like that. I think cycling in this country is often not safe.
Mm.
Um, Neither as an adult, as a mum, I'm scared often when I cycle. Let alone cycling with children. It's not safe. Walking is often not fun. It's, you know, I'm German, as you can probably tell, and I grew up there and I cycled everywhere, and I walked a lot as well. And I just find it really astounding that in London you might stand on a medium-sized road at the side in the dark, in the rain, with a toddler and a carrier. Obviously, talking about experience here. No car will stop. In Germany, in Hamburg, where I'm from, that does not happen. They see a woman with two small children standing at the side of a road, and they are in the rain, in the dark. The second car at the latest will stop, and they will let you through, and the car on the other side will stop, and they will let you go over. That makes for a significantly nicer experience than here. Cycling is, as I said, often feels dangerous. So it's difficult. I think a lot needs to change, a lot needs to be done. Um, on the issue of the underground, you only ever spend quite a short amount of time on the underground. And that it is so polluted is not great at all, and is harmful. But it's a short period of time. But all the cars that are driving outside, they pollute the air for the pedestrians, all of them, and for everyone who lives there, right? So if you live on a main road, and it's typically people from more minority ethnic groups, from less affluent demographics, your council estate and other housing for financial reasons will be on a main road where you open your window and you are breathing in what everyone else's car is putting out.
Mm,
So I think that is also a way to think about it. Like, what are we doing to everyone on a wider scale? And what state are the high streets in that we all attend? What
mm,
state is the road in where my children's school is, right? So I think it's not just about my individual journey, but it's about us as a collective making a choice to not want to pollute the children on the pavement, in the playground, in their homes,
mm,
on the
mm.
main road, and in other areas.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see all the work that you've been doing around kind of raising awareness in air pollution in our environment in general. But I wonder, is there anything moving into the home, inside the home? Um, is there anything inside our home that you think we should be paying particular attention to? I asked that question because obviously I do a lot of work around fragrances and chemicals within the home in cleaning products and everyone's obsession with burning candles, etc. To try and show people how detrimental that is for our health, basically. What do you think the worst culprits are within our home?
So I really focus on road transport and on wood burning, based on the premise that they are the biggest contributors to outdoor air pollution. And if you live there, if you open your door, you're going to breathe what is happening outside your
Mm,
home. So I'm not really an expert on indoor air pollution at all, and I can't give you a proper rating here on candles or scented candles, but at all. But I think obviously a big problem inside a home is any kind of burning, wood burner, open fire, and there is also clear research that a gas stove is a real problem as well. So I've
mm,
personally have been in the lucky position to change my gas to hob. Um,
great.
because I was worried for my children and I was worried for my daughter, who always wants to help cook and had quite a lot of asthma at a time, was sort of with wheezing when she was younger, quite a lot. And I thought the gas stove had to go for that reason.
Great. And did you see any changes in her asthma symptoms?
You know, it was, I didn't see any changes, but because she was sort of having episodes on and off. Also with viruses, it's complicated, and she didn't have any like severe kind of asthma. She was 3 years old, she was wheezing,
Mm,
and it was sort of heading in an asthma direction, but touch wood, she seems to be a lot better these days. But what I found is that once I understood that a gas stove is really polluting, I could smell it.
ah,
And when I took it out, I realized that I actually feel a lot more comfortable, because the smell of gas, once you've
mm,
spotted it, once you know it, I couldn't unsmell it.
mm,
It was, and it made me feel a bit like this is wrong. Actually, now that I know it, I can smell that this is wrong. It's like the smell at a petrol station, you smell it, and once you realize it's toxic, you're like, actually, this smells toxic.
mm. No, absolutely. So, from your work then that you've done through Mums for Lungs, what would you say is changing at the moment? Have you seen changes in your local environment? And for people who are worried about the air quality within their own community, how would you suggest that they go about starting a similar initiative, or who do they contact if they've got worries about air pollution within their local environment?
Contact us. Um, Contact us, hello@mumsforlungs.org, or via all the social media channels, because we are really keen to help. And we have access to air pollution data that is public. I mean, you can look for it yourself, but please do get in touch, because we'll find it quicker and we can help you understand your local air pollution. And we know where to start. A good starting point in the local community is genuinely awareness and a school street. I
Mhm.
love a school street. Like, they're the most joyful experiences, and children love them. There's amazing films available around school streets. We have one on our website where a road that was a sort of normal through traffic road on a sort of side road was closed to road transport uh, between I think 8:30 and 9:30, and it makes a massive difference. It makes the road safer. It makes us air significantly less polluted by something like up to 23%.
Mm.
And that is just a better start to the day. When the last few breaths before you enter school are not diesel filled, your day starts a bit better. It's just the way it is. And, so that is really a good starting point, I think, generally. Otherwise, on wood burning, we know that raising awareness in your community, if you can face it, is really helpful, because I think we are very lucky to be campaigning on wood burning, and we've been doing so for a while. And the luck element now is that media has been really receptive, and research has been coming out again and again and again. And we know that air pollution from wood burning is incredibly harmful to health.
Mm.
And um, and therefore it has been in the media. Sorry, there's a parcel at the door. I'm sure a lot of people can relate. So wood burning has been in the media, and people are becoming more aware that wood burning is a problem. And a friend of mine wrote a letter with 11 people in her neighborhood and sent that on the local streets WhatsApp, and
Mm-hmm.
got a really positive response, saying, just sort of highlighting some research about wood burning, and that all these neighbours, just with first names even, would ask people to consider how much they would burn this winter. And that was
Okay.
really positive.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great advance. Actually, I've got two questions in my head that I really want to ask you. One, is there anything else that you can burn that would be better if you have just invested a whole load of money in a brand new sparkling wood burner, and then you listen to this podcast and you think, oh, and you're not going to be getting rid of your wood burner anytime soon? Is there an alternative to burn that would be safer
Not
or
really.
not?
Burning is bad. I mean, Charlie, you were talking about candles earlier.
Yeah.
Where there's
Okay.
fire, there's smoke.
So
So
basically,
please then have a look at our Instagram for really nice ideas of making your wood burner look really beautiful, fit into your home as a cozy focal point, but without the pollution.
with your Christmas tree lights in it.
Yes, I was thinking that fairy lights. Plants. There's loads of things you can do, but you also raise a really important point, which is people need to be educated around wood burning. And I think it's incredibly unfair that you buy a wood burner and it will say this is an eco design DEFRA
Mm,
approved stove. And then you listen to this podcast or open the newspaper and realize wood burning is incredibly toxic, and you should not be exposing yourself, your children, and your neighbors to them.
mm.
So, one of the things we want, and the one thing I want, to be honest, the most urgent, is that this DEFRA approval seal goes. It's a bit like
Wow.
giving out NHS approved cigarettes. Like, that's insane.
I haven't
So
heard of
that's got
that
to go.
DEFRA approval. Okay, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I'll do some research into that. That's thanks for raising awareness around that. My other question to you was going to be going back to your point about childhood asthma, which just seems to have risen so much through recent years. How much are you finding that asthma is down to air pollution, and how much are you finding that maybe it's down to particular allergies from, I don't know, the amount of pesticides that are on our food or toxins in our water? Have you been able to extrapolate like a direct correlation between air pollution, asthma, and other kind of reasons children might get asthma?
So I'm not a scientist. So that's unfortunately, I'm not the right person to ask for this. But the research is really clear. In communities with really clean air, there's basically no asthma.
Okay.
So asthma is always going to be exacerbated by high levels of air pollution, or
Hmm.
levels of air pollution that most of us in the UK breathe. And there was a stat few years ago, I think from Asthma and Lung UK. Can't remember the source, would need to look it up, which basically said a third of all asthma cases. Asthma would be down by a third if we breathed proper, clean Arctic air.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, that's kind of clear evidence, isn't it, really? Um,
Yeah.
Jemima, it's been a real pleasure chatting with you and hearing all about your campaigning and the difference that you're making out there. Is there anything that you wanted to add to the conversation, to encourage people maybe to get a bit more involved in raising awareness around air pollution in their own communities and their own areas, or anything else you wanted to add in general?
No, well, thank you so much for having me. The one thing I do want to say and want to pitch is our website, mumsforlungs.org, where there is a whole raft of resources. There's information, there's flyers you can order, there's posters you can order. We send out all this information for free. We send out PDF flyers to attach to school newsletters. They have gone out in 10,000s of school book bags, our flyers in paper form or in PDF form. Like, we have the information, we want to help, and we are a grassroots volunteer organization. Everyone is invited to get involved if your mission is also to work on clean air and reduce air pollution at source for children's health. You are invited to join us, whether you're a mum, whether you're not a mum, and whether you're female or whatever. Everyone is really welcome. And I think that's the power. That is the power of Mums for Lungs, is that we are in communities across the country and we're supported by people across the country. But also, our campaigns get better if people even just get in touch and say, my problem is XYZ, or my body reacts in this way. You're welcome to use this information, but I don't want to get involved. Or if people want to hand out a flyer or proofread a flyer or talk to their MP, we would love to have you involved, and we can provide all the support and help to do this in a really easy and effective way.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to add obviously the links to all of your social media and everything else you've mentioned in the show notes. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you, and thank you for all the great work that you're doing out there around air pollution. And yeah, fantastic. And wish you all the best for 2025, because this is our
Ah,
first
thank
recording this
you.
year. So it's great.
Ah, thank you so much. That's so kind of you. So thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Take care. Thank you.